Hey everyone, it's Mojaxx back in the DJcity UK lab. Today we've got a first look at the new, slightly more affordable battle mixer from Pioneer DJ. This is the DJM-S7. Let's get into it. Following the release of the $2,000 DJM-S11 in late 2020, the arrival of the DJM-S7 is a bit of a curious thing. Priced at $1,399 in the US, it's a much more affordable option than that flagship S11, but price-wise it's also lower than the DJM-S9 was at around $1,500. My read of the situation is this: the DJM-S9 in its day was built to be the flagship, the state-of-the-art battle mixer from Pioneer DJ, but now, thanks to improvements in technology over time, the S7 is in many ways superior to the S9, despite always being intended to be a more budget device. The DJM-S7 is designed to work with Serato DJ Pro and Rekordbox and unlocks both applications. As with the S11, it seems to be a Serato device first and foremost, although Rekordbox users won't be disappointed in the integration with that software either. Side by side, you can see the S7 is very similar in both size and layout to the S9. Certainly you should be able to use existing S9 cases with it, although annoyingly an S9 deck saver doesn't quite fit, so you'll need a new one of those if you're replacing an older S9. That means, of course, that the S7 is significantly smaller than the DJM-S11, which has to be larger mainly to accommodate the screen. All three devices are very similar though in terms of width and fader position, so going between them will be a smooth transition. Another thing all three mixers have in common is the construction, with lots of plastic on the body which helps with the sleek aesthetics and the light weight, while still feeling very durable and reliable. I've never had any complaints with my S9 and that is years old now. Sound quality on the DJM-S7 on paper falls somewhere between the S9 and the S11. My biggest concern was with the phono preamps, which just weren't great on the S9. They had a weird roll-off on the top end, which sounded passable with stuff like old Funk 45s, but definitely not ideal with more modern productions. Thankfully, even in my early testing, I can tell that the preamps in the S7 are far superior, and the sound in general is an improvement over the S9, even if it doesn't prove to be quite up there with the S11, which is truly top-notch in the sound department. The S7 has larger pads than the S9 and brings with it all the new ways of working from the S11. The pads can be assigned to different modes on each side and also include the combo pad modes, where you can have split modes on the top and bottom row at the same time. So if you want hot cues on top and samples below, for example, or vice versa, that's perfectly possible. It's also worth noting that the S7 does include Scratch Bank, which is a really killer new feature in Serato DJ Pro. I'll quickly run through the connections. There are phono and line inputs on the two channels, both of which can be used as a DVS input. Master is on balanced XLRs and unbalanced RCAs, and there's a booth output on balanced jacks. Power is fed in via a standard IEC connector. There are two USB ports for connecting to computers, for those easy changeovers and back-to-back sets, and also a built-in 2-port USB hub for connecting other devices like phase, CDJs or extra controllers. There's a mic input with a combo jack and XLR socket and a stereo aux input, both of which have their own level controls on the front panel. The mic retains its on-off and talk-over control, but it does lack the echo function found on the S9, which might disappoint some users. What that makes room for though is the new Bluetooth input. This is designed primarily for connecting phones or tablets running Scratch Looper apps, that kind of thing, although you can put whatever you want through it, keeping in mind that there is always latency with Bluetooth, which is why it's not been widely adopted as a technology in the DJ world yet. Pioneer DJ have utilised the latest Bluetooth 5.0 standard though, which sounds a lot better than the older 4.2 and will certainly be acceptable to most. You have some options with the Bluetooth input. You can feed it to the master with the knob on the front controlling the level, or you can route it to either main channel, so you can use that channel's fader, EQ, filter and even effects on it. One thing to keep in mind with that, it doesn't override the existing channel input, so you'll hear both if you have them playing at the same time. Overall, it's a cool feature and something handy to have at hand in today's connected world. I regularly run Bluetooth audio into my Rodecaster Pro in the lab, as it's a super convenient way of getting audio from my phone into my main speakers. In terms of faders, the S7 has the Magvel Fader Pro, just like the S11. Faders are a very personal thing, but it's my favourite crossfader on the market. Adjustable, long-lasting, and with a great feel, it also cuts superbly well. The up faders are somewhat less to write home about, being fairly standard regular faders. They definitely feel a little looser than those on the S9 and S11, which makes them feel a little cheaper. Their rated lifespan is very long and the cut is tight, so performance-wise they shouldn't be a problem, but they're honestly the only area where the S7 feels more budget orientated than its stablemates. A few quick notes on the rest of the mixer before we move on to the effects. The EQs, filters and trim controls are in a similar layout to the S9, unlike the S11 where they're in a straight line. In general, I prefer that S11 style, but space would obviously be an issue on here, and I got used to the S9 layout easily enough on that mixer. The same thing applies to the library browse and load controls too, and the loop setup. But there is one huge improvement there. Like on the S11, you can choose whether the auto loop button always selects one fixed length or the currently selected length in Serato DJ Pro, which is always my preference. There's a sampler volume knob, which a lot of people do really need, so that's good to see. Queuing is the current Pioneer DJ Battle Mixer standard, a fader between channels and a Cue Master blend knob. That's all fine, but like on the S11, I was disappointed to find again here that there is no split queue. I hope that's something the company can add to both mixers in firmware at some point in the future. So we move on to the highlight of the DJM-S7, the effects. At first glance, it looks like you have less options than the S9 as there are less buttons, but in fact, you can do far more. By holding shift and pushing an effect button, you can choose between different modes for all 6 buttons across both sides. The first, illuminated blue, is the hardware beat effects. Put simply, Pioneer DJ's hardware effects remain the most intuitive hardware effects on the market, bar none, and these are no different. The big paddle controls are comfortable and easy to use, which also helps, but yes, they are spot on. The turquoise mode is Serato or Rekordbox software effects. These are a known quantity by now as well and work just as well on the mixer. Then we get into the green and yellow loop MIDI modes. These are brand new and completely unique, and I think will get a lot of people very excited. What they do is send a MIDI message to software at different beat intervals, which are adjusted per button via the parameter controls. You can also set the beat length value to none if you want things to not be tied to the beat. What that means in practice is that you can activate different functions on beat just by pushing or pulling the effects paddles. The simplest way to show it in action is by loading a drum hit to the sampler and then activating the paddle. That drum hit will then play on beat in sync with the master deck's beat grid at your chosen interval. Stock settings are much the same in both Serato DJ Pro and Rekordbox, with buttons controlling sampler slots, hot cues, raising and lowering the key of a track, using sensor and muting. But as they are sending MIDI signals, you can remap those controls to activate anything you like in the software. Loop rolls would be one that I'd want to try, for example. This is an awesome feature on its own, but even cooler is that in the setting utility, you also have 2 custom effects banks to mess with, so you can create your own combos of hardware effects, software effects, and loop MIDI controls in the same bank. Overall, the effects section of the DJM-S7 is just pretty awesome. If you want simple, you're good, but if you want to go deep, there's a lot of power under the hood. It's the part of the mixer I'm most looking forward to getting to know. So there you go, a first look at the DJM-S7 from Pioneer DJ, a very interesting device in terms of where it sits in the Pioneer DJ lineup. Of course, I'm going to assume that the DJM-S9 is going to go away, that's going to be discontinued, and that will just leave the S7 and the S11 with quite a big price jump between them. But if you look at the pricing that the S9 has been selling for, that's $1,500 and this is $1,400. And for my money, this is far superior to the S9. It's just a more up-to-date mixer. It has more creative functions built in, like the MIDI stuff. You've got the USB hub on the back. The looping is better now on here. And I love the S9. I've used the S9. It's one of my most used bits of DJ kit since it came out. But this is definitely better. I would absolutely take this over an S9 all day long. Better phono preamps as well. And it's cheaper, $1,400. So really, really interesting. I've got a feeling that as good as the S11 is, and the S11 is an absolute weapon, like a proper powerhouse mixer, incredible stuff that thing can do. But I think there might well be quite a big contingent of DJs who actually just go for the S7 because they find it a little bit calmer, a little bit more comfortable, a little bit less stressful. You know, having that screen on the mixer is a very cool function, but some DJs don't like having a screen on their mixer. You know, and when I'm playing on turntables, I tend to focus less on the mixer. When I'm using media players and controllers, yeah, I want loads of great mixer functions. But when I'm playing turntables, I tend to focus on the turntables and less on the mixer. So I wonder if I might be one of the DJs who actually leans towards the S7 over the S11, despite the S11 really being the superior product. So yeah, very interesting times ahead testing both of these mixers. I still have to deliver my full review on the S11 as well, so we'll see how things go in the coming weeks. Thanks for watching today. Make sure you subscribe for all our future tips, tricks and product reviews. I'll see you soon.